Hi y'all. So a friend of mine asked me what I was making for Thanksgiving, and I told her that I was making a shrimp and crab meat dressing, and she said she's never heard of that. Well, currently I live in Seattle. Everyone's from other places. She is from a very uncultural city, Chicago, where they don't know good food. Just kidding, their food's great. But anyway, crab meat and oyster dressing, or just oyster dressing, is basically just your cornbread stuffing with oysters in it. So I kind of like to spruce it up a little bit and do oysters and crab meat. Obviously this is not your mama's recipe, it's not your Mima's recipe, it's my recipe. So I do things a little bit different here, but I wanted to just kind of walk you guys through what I'm doing. I always love to prep the night ahead before Thanksgiving because no one has time Thanksgiving morning to be making everything. So let's walk through everything that we're gonna do. So first off, always gotta start with a cocktail. Because it is a work day and I've worked all day, a little bit tired, I am doing a espresso martini because I can. Now that that's out of the way, so like I said, this dish is super easy. It's basically just a cornbread stuffing. Everybody makes that differently. The only ingredients we have in there is crab meat. We have oysters. Now, I will say this is not a Ina Garden moment. If you don't have fresh oysters at your store, can bought is not okay. These are fresh. These are Pacific oysters, fresh caught. We don't do canned oysters in this house. So the first thing I'd like to do is just kind of drain the oysters. You kind of want the oysters that you're going to use to not be so liquidy. So I just put those into a strainer, but you want to have a dish underneath because you're going to want to catch some of that, what they call a liquor. So we're definitely going to want to put some of that in the cornbread dressing. Ingredients I use, we'll kind of walk through those as we get going. So my pan is heated up, so I am just going to throw in some butter here. Don't be afraid on the butter. So I also like to have all of my ingredients ready. I can't be cutting and chopping as everything is getting cooked. I like to just have everything laid out. Also, who else has a favorite spoon in their house? Mine looks like this. It's burnt around the edges. That's how you know I cook, honey. So once my oil in my pan is heated, the first ingredients we're gonna use is just the Holy Trinity. If you're not from New Orleans or if you don't cook, this is just bell pepper, onion, and celery. Literally goes into everything we cook. So I really love to cook down my Trinity. A lot of people I see will just throw in everything into their mixture once they have all of their stock going, and that just kind of results in like a crunchy cornbread stuffing. The only thing crunchy that I want is the cornbread itself. I don't want any of my vegetables crunchy in there, so I am always going to cook that down really well. Okay, so now that my vegetables have been cooking for a few minutes, I do like to go ahead and add in all my seasonings, let my seasoning cook for just a few seconds, and then I'll add in garlic at the end. So the seasonings that I'm using are pepper, Old Bay seasoning because of the seafood in there, Cajun seasoning because obviously I'm from New Orleans. And then for the dry seasonings, I do rosemary and oregano. So I'll cook that just for a second, let that get pretty fragrant in there. Oh my God, you can smell the Old Bay. I love the smell of Old Bay. So I'll let that cook for a second and then I will toss in the garlic. So if you guys are using garlic, that's between you and God. I don't use garlic in this house. I always use fresh garlic. Also, these little bowls, how cute are they? They are the Le Creuset pinch bowls. A friend of mine bought them for me because he is just the sweetest man. Hi, Andy. All right, so I will let that cook just for a second. You don't want to let the garlic cook too long because you don't want it to burn. So in the meantime, I have my oysters here. I am going to just give those a nice little rough chop. I don't want them cut up too much. I just don't want them whole. Great. So now that those are all cut up, we're going to add just a little bit of stock to the pot to kind of deglaze everything and just give it a little liquid. So I only want to cook the oysters just for a little bit because it's going to get baked, but I don't want to put them in completely raw. So I have some homemade stock. If you don't have homemade, store-bought is fine. Like I said, just a little bit of that. That's also going to help the vegetables kind of soften up just a little bit more. So I'll let that heat up here for a second. The only thing we don't cook on heat right now is the crab meat. So crab meat always is going to come cooked. You're not going to buy that raw unless you buy raw crabs. So that is store-bought. Okay, now that this has sauteed just a little bit more, kind of brought the stock up to a heat, I am now going to toss in the oysters. And so oysters cook pretty quickly. We don't really need to cook those very long. I just want to make sure they're just, a little cooked, not completely raw. So we will throw those in there. Another really important thing is I said we wanted to keep that oyster liquor. So that's just the sauce that the water the oysters have been sitting in. So much flavor in here, a lot of salinity. So we just want to add that right to the pot. Now that the oysters are cooking, you can kind of tell when they're starting to cook because they change in color. They go from gray to more kind of like a whiter color like most fish do. So now that that has cooked for a second, we're going to get our cornbread. So normally I would make this ahead of time. It's been a pretty busy week for me, so she's using store-bought. So you just want to go ahead and toss that in. And we just want to get this a little moist. We're going to add more stock here in a second. I just don't want to cook this on the stove. Now, if this was a regular cornbread dressing, I would probably cook it in all of the stock first. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to have to overcook the oysters. So we just get that nice and mixed. Turn off the heat here. And then we are going to move this into a big mixing bowl. So we'll just scoop this all in here. This smells so good. You can smell the seafood, the oysters, so delicious. Okay, so before we put in more stock, I'm going to take an egg, a well-beaten egg, and I am just going to add that in there. That is just going to give it just a nice little richness and kind of help everything set when it's baking. So just beat the egg, pour that right on top. And then I like to just give that kind of a good mix so it can kind of mix into the breadcrumbs there. And then The last step is the crab meat, and then we're going to add in a little more stock because we want it to be a little more moist because we're going to bake it, so it's going to dry out as we're baking it. All right, so just get that crab meat in there. I just love the smell of seafood. I'm from the South and we just eat seafood and everything. Let's get that nice and mixed in there. I really wish y'all could smell all of this. It smells so good. So once that is nice and mixed, we're just going to slowly start adding a little more stock until we get the consistency that we want. Like I said, it's okay if it's a little more wet because you're going to bake this, and so it's going to dry out. So you want it to have a little more moisture. I feel like oyster dressing or seafood dressing is a little more on the moist side than your regular traditional stuffing. Just a little bit more. So this is kind of the consistency that we're looking for. So delicious. All right, so the last step, all we're gonna do is grease a nice pan, pour this in, and then we'll bake it. So I'm an idiot and I turned my microphone off and forgot to turn it back on. Basically, all I'm saying here is make sure your dish is really well greased because you don't want the bottom to burn. Scoop it all in there, and then I like to bake it for about an hour, 30 minutes uncovered, 30 minutes covered, and then the last 5 minutes I like to broil it so the top gets nice and crispy. So this is such an easy dish. It's a really nice southern treat that my family has always done for the holidays. So I hope you guys make it and enjoy, and if you don't like it, then that's totally fine too. Anyway, until next time,